Tu-160 M. Engels 2 Airbase, Saratov, deep inside the Russian Federation. We are over 400 miles from the nearest Ukrainian soldier, wrapped in a freezing, dense fog rolling off the Volga River. On the main tarmac, the absolute pride of the Kremlin's nuclear triad sits motionless, the Tu-160M White Swan. This isn't just a plane. It is a $270 million supersonic fortress, fully loaded with 60 Kh-101 stealth cruise missiles destined for Kyiv's power grid at sunrise. But take a good, long look at that majestic white titanium skin, because in exactly 90 seconds, this symbol of imperial power is going to be vaporized into a twisted heap of scrap metal hot enough to melt the snow 300 feet away. While the Russian base commanders are sleeping soundly under their billion-dollar S-400 security blanket, they have missed one fatal tiny detail hiding in the mist. If you still believe the Russian propaganda that their airspace is impenetrable, then prepare to have your reality shattered. Stay focused, because the heist of the century has already begun, and the countdown to a total national embarrassment is ticking down from 14 seconds right now. Before we light the fuse, you have to respect the sheer scale of the obstacle. To the untrained eye, penetrating Engels 2 is a suicide pact. This base is the crown jewel of Moscow's strategic aviation, guarded like a dragon's gold. The perimeter bristles with the S-400 Triumph, a technological monster the Kremlin claims can spot a fly sneezing from 200 miles away. These batteries are loaded with 48 N-6E interceptors, hypersonic sledgehammers costing $8 million each. But wait, there is more heavy metal in this parking lot. For close encounters, they have the Panzer S-1, a wicked mix of dual 30mm autocannons and missiles designed to turn threats into Swiss cheese. On paper, this is an impenetrable shield, a multi-layered dome of death no pilot would dare approach. Military experts watching this know exactly what that radar signature implies. Nothing gets in and nothing gets out alive. It is the ultimate Goliath, confident that its sheer size makes it untouchable. Let's talk numbers, because war is just accounting with high explosives. Sitting on that cold tarmac isn't just an airplane, it is a $270 million national asset. The Tu-160M is the largest combat aircraft in the world, powered by 4 NK-3202 engines, engineering marvels that Russia simply cannot mass-produce anymore due to sanctions. Tucked inside its belly are rotary launchers holding 60 Kh-101 stealth missiles. That is the entire winter offensive budget waiting to be launched. If you do the math, we are looking at nearly $500 million of hardware sitting in one exposed parking spot. It is a target so valuable, losing it would be like burning down a Federal Reserve branch. But here is the catch that the Russian planners missed. Putting all your golden eggs in one basket only works if you are sure, absolutely sure, that no one has a hammer. And guess what? The hammer is already airborne, and it didn't cost $1 billion to build. At exactly 2:18 a.m., the silent radar screens inside the S-400 command vehicle suddenly screamed in red. 10 fast-moving targets appeared out of nowhere, popping up on the scope with the exact radar cross-section of British-made Storm Shadow cruise missiles. The operator's pulse likely hit 120 beats per minute instantly. But here is the genius detail that makes this a masterpiece of asymmetric warfare. Those were not million-dollar missiles. They were cheap, experimental decoys, essentially flying pieces of plumbing pipe and plastic with a simple radar reflector attached. Ukraine knows the Russian doctrine better than the Russians do. They know that when the big one shows up on the screen, the orders are to shoot first. The S-400 computer, for all its vaunted algorithms, cannot tell the difference between a terrifying stealth missile and a slow-flying drone carrying a $20 metal corner reflector. It just sees a threat. So, the Russian commander, terrified of losing the Tu-160M on his watch, took the bait. He slammed his hand on the launch button. Stay focused, because this is where the math gets hilarious. In a blinding flash, 4 massive 48 N-6E interceptors roared out of their launch tubes, lighting up the foggy night like a second sun. These missiles accelerate to Mach 6 inches seconds, tearing into the stratosphere. It was a magnificent display of pyrotechnics. The Russians thought they were saving the base. In reality, they were firing $32 million worth of high-tech ordnance at a swarm of glorified hobby drones that cost less than a used family car. It is the ultimate military hustle. The S-400 radar locked onto these bright, noisy decoys, dedicating all its computing power to tracking them. The massive phased array radar tilted upward, scanning the high altitude, looking for the kill. And that is exactly what the Ukrainians were banking on. By forcing the S-400 to look up and engage the ghosts in the sky, they forced the system to ignore the noise near the ground. The invincible eye of Sauron was now staring at the clouds, completely blind to the river below. If you are a fan of electronic warfare, you have to admire the elegance of this trap. It wasn't about overpowering the Russian air defense. It was about hacking their decision-making loop. The interceptors hit their targets, turning the plastic drones into confetti. The Russian crew probably started high-fiving each other, thinking they had just repelled a major NATO-backed strike. But wait, because while they were patting themselves on the back, the real threat was entering the kill zone, completely unnoticed. Inside the mobile command post, the mood instantly shifted from high-alert panic to premature self-congratulation. The battery commander, a man whose uniform likely hasn't seen a frontline trench in years, leaned back in his chair with a smug grin. "Targets destroyed," the operator announced, his voice dripping with unearned confidence. They genuinely believe they are heroes. In their minds, they just intercepted a NATO-level strike and saved the White Swan. You can almost hear the collective sigh of relief, and knowing the habits of rear-echelon Russian units, the sound of a bottle being uncorked to celebrate the victory. But here is the twist that makes this tragedy almost Shakespearean. While they were busy high-fiving over a radar screen that was now clear, they committed the cardinal sin of warfare. They stopped looking. The Pantsir S-1 crews, the men responsible for the last line of defense, stepped out of their vehicles for a smoke break, eager to watch the burning debris of the decoys fall from the sky like fireworks. They were so fixated on the high-altitude light show that they ignored the low-altitude reality. It is a fatal cocktail of arrogance and incompetence. The operators even turned down the radar sensitivity to filter out the clutter caused by the falling decoy fragments. They effectively blinded themselves to make the screen look cleaner. This is the difference between a conscript army fighting for a paycheck and a volunteer army fighting for survival. Russia assumed the attack was over because their old Soviet textbooks say attacks come in single, massive waves. They forgot that Ukraine threw away the textbook 3 years ago, while the Russian bear was busy grooming its fur. 50 autonomous beaver drones were skimming the dark waters of the Volga River, closing the distance at 80 miles per hour. The celebration at Engels 2 was about to be cut short by a very loud, very expensive reality check. At 2:38 a.m., the eerie silence following the decoy interception was shattered. A low hum rose from the riverbanks, quickly growing into the deafening roar of a synchronized hornet's nest. Stay focused, because the ultimate nightmare for any air defense operator is about to unfold. 50 Ukrainian Beaver attack drones, painted matte gray to disappear into the fog, popped up over the tree line. They weren't flying high where the radar could see them. They were hugging the terrain at a suicidal altitude of just 80 meters. This is the moment the blood drained from the Russian commander's face. He realized too late that the $32 million of missiles he just fired were meant for the distraction. The real threat had just kicked down the front door. The Pantsir S-1 crews scrambled, shouting panic-stricken orders. The system's radar spun wildly, trying to lock onto 50 separate targets. But here is the lethal error inherent in Russian tech. The Pantsir is designed to track 4 targets, not a swarm. The computer screen turned into a chaotic mess of blips, unable to prioritize. It froze a digital seizure caused by information overload. If you ask why the Russians didn't use small arms, I'll tell you an unbelievable military secret. Panic destroys discipline. Instead of a wall of lead, the conscripts froze. The sky was thick with retribution. These weren't dumb drones. They were communicating. When the lead drone took a hit, it instantly transmitted the threat location to the pack. The swarm adjusted in real time, flowing around resistance like water around a rock. If you were the battery commander, watching your screens fill with red dots while your interceptors sat empty, what would your next move be? Scream? Pray? Because those were the only options left. The White Swan. That $270 million beauty sat helpless. Its crew was asleep in the barracks, miles away from the cockpit. The air defense bubble had popped. The S-400 was blind. The Pantsir was overwhelmed. And the Tiger armored vehicles were just expensive spectators. The Beavers had arrived at the dam with enough high explosives to reshape the geography. This wasn't a battle anymore, it was an execution. The first wave of 22 drones ignored the plane entirely. They dove straight into the open doors of the munitions bunker housing the AKH-101 reserve. Inside those missiles is JP-10 jet fuel, a highly volatile propellant designed for long-range flight. When the drone warheads detonated, they didn't just start a fire. They initiated a catastrophic thermal runaway. The bunker erupted. A massive fireball, fueled by tons of high-grade accelerant, consumed 60 cruise missiles in a fraction of a second. The Russians didn't just lose missiles, they lost their entire winter strike capability in a single flash of orange light. The shockwave was so intense it shattered windows in residential blocks 3 miles away. But don't blink, or you will miss the main event happening on the tarmac. The final 10 drones executed a sharp high-G maneuver, lining up perfectly with the massive air intakes of the Tu-160M. This is where engineering meets brutality. These drones weren't carrying standard explosives. They were equipped with specialized shaped charges designed to exploit the Monroe effect. Stay focused on the physics here, because this is fascinating. Upon impact, the explosive lens detonated, collapsing the concave copper liner inside the warhead. In microseconds, this liner inverted and formed a hypervelocity jet of molten metal moving at 26,000 feet per second. That is roughly Mach 25. The NK-32 engines, made of high-grade titanium and worth millions on their own, are strong. But against a focused jet of plasma, they are butter. The copper stream punched through the engine casing, instantly liquefying the compressor fan blades. The internal temperature inside the nacelles spiked to 3,000 degrees. The White Swan didn't just explode, it died a painful, structural death. It melted from the inside out. The titanium ribs buckled under the extreme heat, and the massive fuselage groaned before collapsing onto the concrete. In 90 seconds, the pride of the Russian Air Force was reduced to a twisted puddle of glowing slag. It was a masterclass in thermodynamic violence. By the time the Su-35 Flanker E fighters screamed over the base, their afterburners glowing angrily in the night sky, the show was already over. They were just burning expensive fuel to guard a smoking crater. The White Swan was gone, and with it the myth of Russian invincibility. But the real story here isn't the explosion, it is the receipt. Let's do the forensic accounting on this disaster. Russia just lost a $270 million strategic bomber, 60 stealth missiles worth over $100 million, and fired $32 million of interceptors into the empty air. That is a total loss of over $400 million in 90 minutes. And the cost to Ukraine? 50 drones at roughly $50,000 each, plus some plywood decoys. The total bill for the attackers was less than $3 million. That is a return on investment of over 13,000%. Even the most aggressive Wall Street hedge fund manager would kill for those margins. But wait, there is one more layer to this financial ruin. The psychological damage is priceless. Because the Kremlin can no longer trust its own air defense, they have been forced to evacuate their remaining bombers 2,000 miles north to Olenia Air Base in the Arctic Circle. This adds 5 hours to every mission flight time, burning through airframe hours and pilot fatigue twice as fast. They are effectively wearing out their own fleet just running away from toys. This is the brutal lesson of modern warfare. It is no longer about who has the biggest parade in Red Square. It is a cold, hard math problem. Ukraine proved that a smart algorithm and a cheap motor can defeat a billion-dollar legacy system. The era of the tank and the heavy bomber is ending, replaced by the era of the swarm. So here's the question for all the armchair generals watching. If you had $1 billion to defend a country today, would you buy one S-400 battery that can be blinded by a plastic decoy, Or would you buy 20,000 autonomous drones that never sleep? Let me know in the comments below which side of history you want to be on.